So, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it started off as an attempt to make comic book superhero adaptations that are somewhat grounded in the real world, and you can really see that in the first Iron Man movie, with some suspension of disbelief. And I feel like us as movie watchers have been kind of trained to have that suspension of disbelief. But as the MCU started to expand, once they were able to kind of plant their feet in the ground, that's when they saw the opportunity to kind of add other elements from the comics, so say fantasy, cosmic, magic, and the film started to ask more from the audience. Even so, you have movies like Ant-Man and the Wasp, which I would argue kind of inspired this conversation that we're having, that are science-based, but are, let's say, to put it lightly, completely nonsensical. So I guess the question I wanted to introduce is it worth trying to get the MCU back on track in this regard in terms of depicting science in a reasonable manner on screen? So this is another edition of AP Marvel. I am Chris Compendio. I'm here with Anthony Payon, who is so excited to talk about this. Right, Anthony? Oh, yeah.
This is my first episode.
Is this your first episode with this new mic?
It is so nice.
Excellent.
Oh, God. I'm looking at the waveforms, and it's like so precise,
man,
and it's like not like giant static bumps. Oh,
all right.
This is good.
Yeah,
drink
some water, Anthony. And I'm here. I'm here. Our special guest. I'm here with our special guest, Betsy Devos. No, Betsy. You told me how to pronounce your last name, and I already forgot.
It's Ladajets.
Ladajets. Okay,
yeah.
Like Lady Jets. Okay.
Yeah.
And Betsy, can you tell us a bit about what you do? What do you do in life? Tell us all.
Yeah. So I'm a rising senior at Barnard College studying biology and English, and I'm hoping to go into science communications. So things like how science is portrayed in what is literally the world's biggest movie franchise is pretty important to me on that front.
Right.
I'm actually recording from a lab at Barnard where I've been doing some research this summer. So yeah. And I'm also a pretty big Marvel fan.
Behind you, and like safety posters.
Yeah.
There's also a cactus
it's one of
here. I don't know
America's
if you can see
trees.
it. That's probably the best part. It's hanging out.
Does the cactus have a name?
I don't know. I should ask the person who runs the lab about that.
Oh, yeah, get back to us on that. So, yes, Betsy, you were here to blind us with science. Anthony, can you remind us, as a recent graduate of Carnegie Mellon University, what is it that you studied?
I studied physics to start off, and then I switched. Yeah. But I am an engineer.
Okay. Yeah, so what... Okay, but like what, in terms of like things that you're interested in, like reading about and learning more about?
Quantum mechanics.
Oh, yeah?
That type of stuff. I like space stuff in general, but, that type of stuff. I like... Maybe.
Are you gonna go to space one day?
Maybe someday. I keep the dream alive. Be an astronaut if I want.
Keep the dream alive.
Always gotta keep the dream alive.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Betsy, what other fields of science are you interested in? Just learning, reading about, etc.
Well, biology is pretty broad, but I try to read as much as I can. I mean, my research is in plant science, so I kind of focus on that. But I like to keep up with space news too, and quantum physics is really interesting to me. Although when I read an article about it, I maybe understand like half of it, but I try.
Okay, and I guess in terms of my scientific credentials, I don't know. I saw Armageddon by Michael Bay once. I mean, that was accurate, right? They had to drill into the asteroid, and
that's how that works.
Let's say that was accurate.
No, I'm mainly into like English and movies and whatnot. So, I don't know. I was in the honors biology class in junior year of high school. Yeah. I mean, I think that's why I got you two. So I think we'll have a smooth conversation here going forward. But speaking of movies like Armageddon, I'm wondering what is the importance of having accurate science in movies in the first place? Like, why not just let go and just let the suspension of disbelief just totally take you? Do either of you want to pick up on that?
I think it's important because science is kind of a weird profession in like the public eye, because a lot of people don't really know exactly what scientists are doing on a day-to-day basis, or like what your work is actually like. Like if you say to somebody, I work in retail, or like I like make ads, somebody can have a clear picture of what you're doing. But if you're like working in quantum physics, it would take you half an hour to just sort of describe the general area of what you do every day. So I think having accurate portrayals of science in pop culture helps to sort of bridge that gap and helps it make more understandable to people, so that when you have an important scientific study come out, or when you're, say, trying to convince like the political leaders of a country that climate change is an actual threat, people will be more likely to sort of trust the actual scientists because they've seen scientists and they know, like, oh, okay, that's like a person who's doing their job and is trustworthy, and I sort of know them a little bit.
Right.
You know?
So that's why we need movies like The Day After Tomorrow, right?
Where
I think I think it was Lindsay Ellis who pointed out there was a scene where it's like in India and it's snowing and there are protesters chanting "Stop Global Warming" in English, which was great cinema, great science, and
yeah, because
really?
it was just like, oh, look at all these people dying.
Just that whole subgenre of movies.
Honestly, WALL-E terrified the shit out of me. So I was like, oh man, that's going to be our planet one day. I don't want to be on a trash planet.
Trash planet.
I mean, I'm
it's
a
okay.
trash person.
We'll all be dead by then,
like
so don't worry about
that.
Yeah. Anthony, any thoughts on science in movies in general before we get to the MCU?
Talked about how it makes it more realistic, and even if you're not trying to make it more realistic, making it sound like, to a lot of people, they don't know what the fuck quantum physics is. They don't know like how neutron stars work or black holes. So like hearing it like sound like, to a lot of people, science sounds cool. Science sounds fancy. Science sounds unique and exotic. So in some capacity, it makes it, more interesting. Like, look at Doctor Who. That's
what Bill Nye is around for.
It's all bullshit, but like it's fun.
Yeah. I mean, they get away with it because they use fake science to tell interesting stories, whereas like Armageddon uses fake science to tell dumb stories. So I have this distinct memory of middle school where I had an earth science teacher. He showed us the movie The Core. Have either of you seen The Core?
I've watched it.
No.
Chris, why did you keep referencing Armageddon when you could have referenced a better movie that talked better, as in the sense of more ridiculous, that talks about science way more than Armageddon, like The Core? Where you have scenes of the Golden Gate Bridge where there's just a guy with his arm out and then he gets fucking cancer because ultraviolet rays are just beaming on his arm and he immediately gets sunburned, and then the beams of the Golden Gate Bridge start snapping and the whole bridge collapses into the water, because that makes sense.
Oh my god. I knew I said vivid memory, but I think you like memorized the whole movie in your head. That's amazing.
What happens in Day After Tomorrow? Seeing a bunch of people die is kind of like, I don't like it.
Yeah.
So it sticks in my head.
Yeah. I mean, this is the movie where they had to go to the center of the Earth and then restart the Earth's core. Because science.
Caterpillar that drilled into this, that went through the Mariana Trench, and then dug through the planet. Sam Neill died because of crystal, because there's giant crystals underneath the planet. Went through his helmet. Is that Sam Neill?
That was Sam Neill?
Who's the guy? Who's the president in
I don't remember.
National Treasure 2?
Bruce Greenwood. Oh my god. Why we're getting too deep into the core. I was just trying to make a point. Oh my god. Okay, the other example, the opposite example was my 8th grade life science teacher showing us Gattaca.
So depressing.
I know, but it feels a little more regardless if it's like realistic or not, it feels a little more timely. It feels more plausible, if that makes sense. And I feel like in modern day cinema, like Christopher Nolan is the one trying to kind of fight for accurate science in movies. So like Interstellar was like his like thesis on that. Yeah. Like this is how a black hole should actually look like in film. It should look like a real black hole and not
the rest of the film brought like the real science out, made it super cool. Whereas and the message of that movie was more of like human perseverance, where on like a physical level and on a astronomical level. So making it more realistic made the struggle more real. Where you have Gattaca, where you have like the idea of like dissecting people down to their genome and then figuring out who's good and who's bad seems is interesting, and the science is interesting because it seems like a real thing that could happen, 1, and 2, it's, it goes back to the idea of eugenics, which is like Nazis like we're like, this is A-okay, and like that type of realistic approach was trying to tell something. And then you have the core, which is like, take care of the planet. Don't use nukes, because as we remember from the lore of...
If you have a pacemaker, then you're screwed.
The core.
That's the message of the movie.
The core lore, they used...
the core lore?
Nukes, because the North Koreans had nukes. And they were testing them underground, and that caused the Earth's core to stop. Which makes sense. Okay. So I don't know what it was supposed to teach people. So going back to the main point of what this relates to the MCU. Wait, what'd you say?
Yeah, don't use nukes.
Yeah, nukes are bad. Don't use nukes.
Nukes are bad.
But what this relates back to the MCU is that these...
Yeah.
So then, start with Iron Man 1, Betsy, if you want to talk about Iron Man 1 at all. It's, like Tony Stark is kind of like an Elon Musk, entrepreneur, inventor, public figure, an MIT alum, we should mention. We actually saw him in MIT in Civil War, which was a neat little scene. And I think you added some notes here about some actual elements that were, present in Iron Man 1, if you wanted to talk about those.
Yeah, I was thinking if we want to track the growing disbelief, like suspension of disbelief that viewers need to have, if you start from Iron Man 1 and then you go all the way to Infinity War, which is asking so much of you, all Iron Man 1 wants the viewer to believe is like, hey, this guy who we've established from the beginning is pretty smart and can build a lot of things, builds himself an arc reactor, and then he builds himself the Iron Man suit. Or they come at the same time. I don't remember the plot that well.
Arc reactor first, then the suit.
But he made a tiny one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's just, it's just advanced engineering, yeah. So that's starting from a pretty realistic place, right?
The whole concept of the arc reactor as renewable energy, like, I think the line, I remember when Tony was trying to argue with Jeff Bridges about like the prospect of using the arc reactor as kind of like their new Stark Industries like new thing, and Jeff Bridges is like, oh, the arc reactor, that was just a publicity stunt to shut up the hippies, which I always feel like is kind of a line that's kind of waved away because it kind of gets into like
power?
Nuclear power, yeah, the ethics behind that. You know, I mean, like, first of all, they're making weapons, which, like, by, like, inherently is already, like, this unethical, business practice that they have, but, the premise of, like, oh, we're gonna make a renewable energy source to make these deadly weapons to shut the hippies up, I always thought that, like, that's something we've never really stopped and talked about because of how fast of a movie Iron Man is.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I don't know if anyone wants to pick up on that, but... it's just such an interesting thing to me. Just this whole transition of, you know, Tony Stark's arc is him being an asshole into him being, I guess, less of an asshole, and seeing where the arc reactor technology and the suits kind of go along with that arc, like, Anthony, what you were talking about, kind of interweaving the science with the thematic part. I mean, Pepper Potts literally puts his original arc reactor in a case and, like, said it's, like, proof that you have a heart, you know?
Yeah.
And kind of, like, building this suit, you know, as realistic as it is or not. This almost kind of a life support system for him, I thought was, that was, like, a really fascinating theme to me.
Interesting. It's, like, the science in Iron Man kind of just was a little bit more. Was just like it made him feel like it kept him alive, and that kind of felt more realistic.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's very minimal, but like it just felt a little bit more realistic. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think the movie, because of that, it's watchable as like an action movie. It doesn't feel like you're watching like a fantasy anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like he builds
right.
this thing.
And you understand how thing works.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem fake.
Is the concept of an arc reactor like a source of renewable energy even like is there like a lick of plausibility to that?
When I was a kid I thought it was real. I'm not kidding. I actually thought that like that was something like the big ones were real. And the little one was the science fiction part.
Oh.
Yeah.
You were bamboozled.
I mean, I was bamboozled by a lot.
Yeah. But I just keep thinking about, and I thought a lot about this in the scene of Civil War where Rhodey, where his power source was destroyed by Vision and he falls this very great height and he's unconscious. He becomes unconscious in midair. And then he hits the ground and he survives, but he breaks his back. Like, shouldn't he be like goo?
Dead?
Like, shouldn't he like?
He was in a suit.
I know, but even still, okay, all right. I just have I remember I was watching this video about why Marvel action figures are apparently better than DC. Why action scenes are better than DC action scenes, and they showed the clip from Iron Man 1 of Tony in his original suit, flying out of the cave. I think it's in Afghanistan, not Iraq, right? Or is it Iraq? I forget.
Afghanistan, I think.
Yeah, but he's flying out the cave, and then he like hits. He lands in the desert, but he like hits the ground like head first, and then like there's a giant graphic that it's just the word dead. And but like obviously no, you can't kill the character that way. Like so I don't know. I mean, have we basically conceded that we were just going to forgive things like that, like just the basic physics of the MCU that like Ant-Man is going to hold on to Hawkeye's arrow and get launched by an arrow and like not, I don't know, have all of his innards get rearranged?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, okay, it's not something you're ever like.
I think that's just like general action movie disbelief.
Yeah,
maybe somebody who is a doctor would feel different.
Look, if a man could jump across an apartment building to another one and not break his ankles, I think that's pretty cool.
Are we talking about? Oh, we're talking about Mission Impossible
Mission
Fallout.
Impossible Fallout.
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking of
where
that
he
too.
did jump across the building and in real life broke his ankles.
Yeah, and they use that shot.
He didn't.
Well, I mean, they use that. So he's actually limping when he's running after that jump. But I digress.
But is that real Tom Cruise limping? Or is
that's real Tom Cruise limping, but I don't think I forget the character's Ethan Hunt. That's not Ethan Hunt with a broken ankle, I guess. Speaking of, I didn't have a transition there. No.
Speaking of Ant-Man,
Ant-Man
and the Wasp.
No. That's a big jump, my friend.
Okay.
So the chronology gets a little weird here. So like Thor and like Incredible Hulk and Iron Man 2 kind of all happen at the same time.
Big week.
Oh, I forgot. Elon Musk was in Iron Man 2, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
They were talking about space things.
Yeah. No, that's weird. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say about Elon Musk. Thor 1, I think, was kind of the biggest challenge that Marvel Studios had at the time, because they'd already established the world of Iron Man. Like that, you can watch that movie by itself, you can just like disregard that Nick Fury scene, and it's like its own standalone world. Does anyone remember that all-important quote that Thor gives to Jane Foster, played by Natalie Portman?
Yeah, I rewatched Thor 1 a few weeks ago, so I feel very prepared for this part of the podcast.
Yeah! There we go.
But yeah, he basically says, your ancestors call this magic, you call it science. I come from a place where they're the same thing. Mm-hmm. So, he's basically saying that I think this movie does a really good job of like justifying science in the MCU, because it doesn't complicate it. It says, all right, science, magic. It's just different names for the same concept.
Yeah.
And then it sort of breaks down a little bit, because he starts trying to explain like how the 9 realms are linked.
Right.
The Yggdrasil.
Yeah,
how the life tree works.
And
which is like weird.
And it's never clear whether these are like other planets out in the galaxy somewhere, but they're connected, or it's like parallel universes to Earth, that they're in other dimensions. I think in the comics
they are
they're
other planets.
Yeah.
They are other planets that are connected.
Yeah.
But they're called realms because they're connected through the life tree.
Yeah, and because they're all sort of under Asgard.
And remember, this is also based off of the comics. I mean, not the comics, sorry. This is based off of Norse mythology.
Yeah, we gotta go before the comics.
We gotta go before the comics. And in Norse mythology, they are different dimensions. They are not different planets. And, I mean, if anyone's played God of War, you know that they're different planets.
Yes.
Different dimensions.
Right.
And you have to dimension hop, which is why the word realm is weird, but like makes sense.
Oh yeah,
with
that's true.
Norse mythology.
Yeah, I never thought about that in the context of the movies.
Yeah, so it's like, going back to Norse mythology and like looking how all of that shit worked, and then the lingo got carried over.
Yeah,
that's it. Yep.
They also they sort of explain how Thor or the other characters who use the Bifrost are able to jump between realms. Because it's a little bit like a Tesseract in Wrinkle in Time, where it's like they're folding 2 points together, sort of.
Oh, right, yeah.
Except that you have this channel. And then, you don't have to worry about explaining, like, how can you breathe in space or whatever.
Yeah, it's a very, like, easy to digest visual of just, like, the rainbow streak and just kind of flying through that.
Remember, this is also, once again, Norse mythology.
Yeah.
A lot of rainbows.
A lot of rainbows.
Yeah. I think my problem with Thor 1 is that, I mean, I think we did a good job adequately explaining all the concepts of it, but I feel like the movie, I don't know, I didn't pick up on a lot of that during the movie. So, like, the fact that we're still confused on, like, if they're planets or realms or dimensions or...
That was the point of what Kenneth Branagh was trying to go for, was making it fantastical.
Yeah.
That was how he shot it. That's how he directed it. He was trying to make it more of like this fantasy storytelling, Shakespearean art form, where it's like... And then like in Thor 2, it didn't really add and didn't build upon that in the way that we would have liked. Like, there was that whole that whole chalkboard that had all the science words and stuff, and it's like... Whoa, this is kind of cool and interesting, but...
I did like that little bit, because it was kind of, like the universe's attempt of bringing those fantastical complex, but kind of trying to make sense.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, real human science, but, like, within the universe.
But they didn't build on it.
Of course.
Is what I'm thinking.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So why, like Jane Foster, I think is a nurse in the comics.
Yeah.
So why make her a scientist in the movies? Like, why is that such an important element that they had to change for the movie version, you think?
Well, she's a nurse in, like, the original first Thor comics. In the more recent ones, she is a doctor. So she moves up. She moves up there.
Right.
And she becomes Thor. But,
right.
That's...
Yeah.
We'll
wait on that.
We'll wait on that when that becomes
the way they,
I
think
Kevin
the
Feige,
reason why they made her a scientist is to make the bridge between what makes Thor interesting to an Earthling is that he's basically an alien.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And a scientist trying to understand an alien is interesting.
Right.
And also it helps to bridge the gap of somebody who doesn't know anything about the comics or anything about Norse mythology watching the movie.
Yeah.
Because not only is she someone who's she's not someone who's like entirely naive to what's happening, because she can put it in the context of her work, which has been on like astronomy and space physics.
So I have a quick little thing. When Loki and Thor are really young at the beginning of Thor 1. Is that, like, before humanity was created?
Yeah?
Because Loki needs to appear in Norse mythology.
Okay.
I have the script open. I'm gonna find it.
No, he has to... See, Loki has to appear as an adult in Norse mythology. So that means whenever that stuff happened 10,000 years ago, it needs to happen in universe. So like we time hopped like 15,000 years in movie, which I think is interesting.
Okay, yeah, I never
because
really understood
Thor
the passage of
it
time.
looks like he's like in his 30s, but he's fucking
he's
fucking hundreds and he could be thousands of years old.
Yeah, and then everyone likes to point out that like all of the crazy events of like Dark World, Age of Ultron, Ragnarok, and like everything we see of him in the MCU is a relatively like tiny part of his life compared to like the rest
which
of
is
his
like
life.
Wild, and it's like it just clicked for me, and it was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
It's like a wild thing to think about. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
He says doesn't he say at one point that he's like 1,500 years old or something? Thor.
That sounds right.
But that doesn't even seem time-wise right.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I think the scene at the beginning of Thor 1, Odin is talking about stuff with the Vikings as though that already went down.
Yeah.
So,
but what time period were the Vikings? I'm sorry. This has become more of a history thing now.
We're
getting off
Marvel History 101. Yeah.
I don't know if you wanted to jump to Thor 2, but Thor 2 kind of talks about science a little bit as well.
Yeah.
What Jane Foster was sitting on that table thing, and they were moving things and touching, CGI buttons and stuff, and they were doctors, and they were using magic to treat her.
Oh, that scene. Okay, when they were like seeing, like finding the aether in her. Okay, I totally forgot about that.
Yeah,
and she was trying to like explain it, like, and they're like, "Oh no, it's." I forgot the exact terminology they used because I don't remember anything about that movie.
Yep.
But yeah, I do distinctly remember that. So yeah, Thor: The Dark World didn't really expand on that too much, but it
would have been nice, but
yeah. But when we're moving on from Thor 1, like the next, like I guess next in line will be like Cap 1 and the Incredible Hulk, which both had this through line of the super soldier serum. And to me, the way science, and this is just my perspective, I want to hear your opinions, but I feel like it kind of uses science in a very like mad scientist kind of way, like more so with the Hulk and a kind of Jekyll Hyde way. And I'm wondering, it looks like, Betsy, you put some links here. My question was, like, are there other people in real life?
I mean,
really?
It's based off of, like, ideas of what, like, a super soldier can be. I mean, like in real life, people try to do that. Nazis in real life try to do that. The Nazis in real life thought the Aryans were super people. Like, it's... I mean, literally, like, Ubermensch, like, thought they were super people. I mean, then you have, like, the what's the LSD thing called? MK Ultra. Like, people thought that made people super powered and stuff. It's like secret government things that made people super powered. Like, those are conspiracies that go around.
Okay, but it is sense? I guess so. You're saying it's actually rooted in, like, you know, even though it's like a little deeper than
exactly,
you know, more transparent historical events and things that we all kind of know about. Like, there is precedent for, like, crazy people. I mean, maybe not crazy people, but, like, ambitious people trying to find that kind of solution.
Yeah, and I mean that also goes back to, like, you know, like stories about Hercules, who is a demigod, who is half human, half god. So you have, like, you know, stories like that where it's, you know, like, are there people like that in real life?
I feel like it's been a science fiction kind of trope for so long that it's easily believable when you put it
super soldiers.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think there is a world where, like, the first Captain America movie is possible, where, like, it's, oh, we chose you for this program because you have the biggest heart, you know, because you're the best, like, morally you're the best person. Whereas, like, I'm not even sure if...
in real life they wouldn't choose morally the best person. They would choose someone who's, like, healthy and most
already strong.
Yeah.
But you know, it's a good movie.
next time, Steve Rogers and those of his ilk. So would Bruce Banner have actually survived that?
No.
All of that.
No.
Nope.
Nope.
No, that kills you.
Yeah.
I think there was a Family Guy episode where Mayor Adam West tried to get superpowers, so he went to the toxic dump, rolled around in toxic waste, because as we all know in comic books, toxic waste gives you superpowers, and he rolled around in it, and then he went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "You have cancer."
Yeah, that's pretty much what would happen.
That's literally what would happen.
I mean, it's, like, conceivable. This is how I sort of rationalize it to myself.
Sure.
That it could be, like, a kind of rapid mutation that is, like, cancer.
That's what I was thinking.
It is, like... But somehow it's triggered by his moods or whatever and can be reversible.
Yeah.
But it's just, like... It's, like, not that much of a... It's not that far. The suspension of disbelief is him not dying. If you get past that, then after that it's like, okay, well, I guess he could transform.
So can Banner die? Like old age?
I don't think so.
Like if someone stabbed him, like really bad, or cut his head off.
I don't know.
I think he would turn into the Hulk and then heal himself.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's like it's. I mean, with that Edward Norton movie, like he had the he was like keeping track of his pulse the entire movie, right?
Yeah.
So it was kind of more of the, you know, the adrenaline, like the kind of fight or flight aspect, rather than like, you know, like getting mad, I guess, which we're used to the catchphrase, "You won't like me when I'm angry." And there's that freaking scene in that movie where like they're about to have sex, and then his heart rate monitor starts beeping. It's like, oh yeah, I can't do this. And then the kind of the most significant part of that movie, which is the only thing that the other movies have kind of picked up upon, is him jumping out of the helicopter in order to kind of to put himself in that state, and then like transform into the Hulk, which they hilariously subverted in Ragnarok. We should mention.
Where he just
that was a wacky little
So I guess in that case, like he hulked out and then got healed, because he looks kind of dead for a bit, didn't he?
Yeah, I think that was the idea.
He looked like primo dead.
That was very unsettling, just watching like
his body flop onto the rainbow bridge.
The close up of unresponsive Mark Ruffalo is haunting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting if you talk about a progression of like the audience having to believe in more in the fantasy more and more. In the first movie, it's like, okay, we can see that he like the Hulk comes out when he has high adrenaline. It's like a scientific sort of response. But then in Infinity War,
there's a quantity.
The Hulk, he's got plenty of adrenaline. He's plenty mad, and the Hulk is just like, no.
Yeah, for like emotional reasons, like
so, like
Hulk has consciousness.
The Hulk is his own character, sort of.
Yeah, yeah.
Which in the comics makes sense.
Yeah, because they like.
But like
split. So.
We try to be not all the comics with the MCU, and it's
Well, I think it can be a sort of like consciousness, subconscious sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're like two minds that are in the same person that like split. But I don't know. I don't think we know enough about psychology to even try to start to explain that.
Yeah, we'll get a fourth guest for that. So all of these worlds kind of collide. We talked about Iron Man, Hulk, Cap, and Thor, and then they all collided in the Avengers. Did that movie hold up in terms of like mashing them all together? Like, did you buy it, or did it feel? Did it ever feel incompatible?
The mashing was like okay. The science in that movie with the Tesseract was like.
What science in that movie? What are you talking about?
There was, and it was kind of like, oh, this is so campy. Oh,
Loki's whole mind control thing.
Mm-hmm. Like with Peter Selvig, it was just like, so cringe. There's something about neutrinos. It was so awkward.
Yeah,
there's an element that they were looking for. Hold on, I'm actually gonna pull this up because I'm intrigued.
Wasn't the element that Tony Stark created in Iron... First of all, Tony Stark created an element in Iron Man 2. We forgot to mention that. But I want to say that's like the same... Like, it has like the same like molecular structure as the Tesseract, I think, in like kind of its way to tie in with all of the Avengers stuff.
I mean, creating an element is like, that's fine. Comparatively, because people discover new elements by just like bringing electrons together really fast or whatever. So,
but do they do it in their basement of their Malibu mansion?
If they're Tony Stark,
that's true.
The key to figuring out that he needed whatever what is it called? To figure out how to create the element.
Yeah,
he needed like the picture of the Stark Fair because it was secretly a
sure
the atom.
Yeah, I mean that was a different suspension of disbelief that we're talking about there.
Weird.
Because I'm just wondering about how they tried to they I mean I guess it made sense how they brought all these heroes together through the Tesseract because it's from Thor's world, but, Cap was, like, the first one to, like, kind of track it down in his movie, and I guess if that element thing is true, Tony Stark, that's why he's there, and then they hired Bruce Banner to track it down because science, right? That was the reason why.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, like,
they needed Bruce Banner because the Tesseract emitted gamma radiation.
Right, and that's his
and he
field.
knows stuff about... And that's his field.
Yes, about gamma radiation. However that relates to magical blue cube that does space stuff.
Well, I don't know. Everything in the universe is something. So
iridium.
Yeah, sure.
They needed a high concentration of iridium. Iridium.
Was that when they went to Germany and then Loki took the guy's eye?
Yes.
Yeah. Fascinating movie. Joss Whedon, a powerhouse writer, as we know him to be.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So I mean, at that point, you just kind of, because you see Thor and Iron Man in the same movie, you see them share the screen. Does that kind of give the filmmakers permission to do whatever the hell they want to after that? Just because, like, we have these two here together. We can just do whatever we want to now, or like, when we get to, like, the Guardians films with all the sci-fi nonsense, like, do they give themselves leeway, or should we still hold them, accountable in some way, like, in terms of, like, depicting science? Or are there just no rules anymore at this point?
Well, I think the Thor movies were still sort of at least trying to hold themselves accountable.
Sure.
They were succeeding maybe like 50%. But they were putting the words on the chalkboard, or they were giving Jane the explanations and the notebook and all that.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm looking this up.
Of course.
Iridium is actually a good... When protons bounce off of iridium, it creates antiprotons.
Uh-huh.
And that's actually what happened in the movie.
Hey!
The
there you go.
Protons, and then would bounce off of iridium, and then once it bounced off the iridium, it would create antiprotons.
Okay. What does it say about being helping create a portal to bring in giant space aliens and metal serpents?
I mean, technically, you could say that there are pockets, like little infinitesimal pockets all across our planet that are just opening up wormholes and closing them in instances. But,
I mean, the whole universe has, like, background radiation, right? So it could be like we're using this high-powered radiation object to, like, connect with it somewhere else. I don't know.
No, that's not how it works.
That's not how it works.
No. Probably not.
It's space, time, and gravity and
okay,
stuff.
Never mind. I'm not a
physicist.
physicist.
No, it's okay. It's weird. People don't get it, and they think that it's all over the place.
Well, speaking of don't get it, the Guardians movies, because they're just making up technology at that point, because you're like a galaxy away, so you have, I mean, I guess you have that space, pun not intended, to kind of do whatever you want. So you have a cybernetic raccoon, you have a cybernetic being. Yeah, you have Nebula, who's like literally like this super augmented alien from being like ripped apart and rebuilt over and over again.
Yes.
And whatever Star-Lord like always has in his bag, like all of these crazy gadgets that he has. At that point, it's just space fantasy at that point. So there's no I guess there's no plausibility required. And still, the main question everyone asks is like, yo, how does he power his Walkman? That's like the number one question people ask in terms of like the accuracy of that movie. Yeah. So I think one of the neater images of that of the second movie was when they crashed their ship in that planet. And Rocket's standing behind, and he's, like, repairing the ship. He has, like, this kind of gun device.
He has a gun thing that's literally, like, making the ship what it was. It's like, basically, if you had spray paint that sprayed literally what was already on the wall.
Yeah, I want to say there was an actual, like, explanation behind that. It was like, oh, it has, like kind of like a memory imprint of the ship, and it's kind of like rebuilding it again in that way, which I was like, okay, that's cool. Like, cool. If you're gonna like make up fake science, at least make it in like a like Star Wars. You can open a book and it'll explain like how all these things work, like the hyperdrive and all that stuff, even though
crystals,
it's not
the light crystals. That's how,
like hyper crystals.
Lightsabers work. It makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I have these frickin' books from like me, like when I was a kid, and it has like it's the cross sections of all the ships, and it kind of like opens them up and dissects them and like tells you what each part of the ship is called, which is like
so cool.
Yeah. Same with and Betsy, I know you saw a lot of Star Trek recently. Is that right? Or,
I have seen a lot of Star Trek.
Yeah. We can talk about science and Star Trek all day.
Like that part in the movie where they beam up the two people and something goes wrong with the beaming thing and they come back all garbled, and then the radio from like the base says, did they make it back? It's just like, what came back wasn't human. And it's like, oh god.
Yeah.
What the fuck happened to them?
I think I know what you're talking about. I mean, I'm
It
thinking
was
of
like
a
the
different
opening
Star
scene
Trek,
of the movie of like the first,
like the original movie. Like,
no, I think it was the opening of the first Star Trek movie. It's
Yeah.
how Kirk got onto the Enterprise, because it was the captain that was supposed to be beamed up to the ship, and that's what happened. Something malfunctioned.
Yeah. I read about that on Wikipedia. I think I didn't actually watch the original movie. I started with Wrath of Khan, man. But there was a similar Star Trek Voyager episode where it was Tuvok and Neelix that accidentally merged into one being in a transporter accident, and they just called him Tuvix. But they found a way to separate that, and there was this whole ethical dilemma. It was like, wait, but now he's like a new person. Can we just kill him like that? And it was bullshit. But it was really interesting, ethical like dilemma there. Nothing that like the MCU movies really get into, I would say. But I mean, I guess the point I was just trying to make was that, like large expansive universes like Star Trek and Star Wars, they I don't want to say they make up science, but they make it sound plausible by fleshing it out,
They also make it, they have more leeway because they can just say, well, it's aliens. Like, aliens made this technology. So we don't have to explain it in our terms because it's not like our thing,
Yeah.
So,
but what about Ant-Man does not have that luxury.
No.
Is there anything you want to say about Ant-Man, Betsy, to start us off?
Well, the first one is, like, fine.
Sure.
It's the second one where they start, like, putting all of this bullshit in the quantum realm where I start to get really confused.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back on the first Ant-Man movie and trying to remember how they explained
it.
The shrinking. Yeah. And I don't know. Because
he still has, like, the same density, I want to say, the same mass, maybe?
Yeah.
So, when he's, like, little size, he would still have relatively, like, he would still have the same strength of a normal-sized person, was how I understood it at first.
I don't think that's what it is, though, because if that's what it is, then when he got big, it would be the reverse.
Exactly, right? Yeah.
I think it's when he's little, he has this proportional strength of what ants have, and ants can lift a lot more than their body.
Well, yeah, like, what's it, like, is it 100 times their size? Is that the right number? Or, roughly. And then Giant Man is just, I
think it's gotta be, like, warping, I don't know, it's changing the boundaries of space, or I don't.
It's the concept of Pym Particles, which is like what kind of gives them their shrinking and growing abilities. It's kind of like whenever I see people talk about it online, they always liken it to the Speed Force in the DC universe, where it like the Flash, like the comics and the show and all of that stuff, anything involving the Flash, has a lot of BS, and whenever something crazy, inexplicable happens, usually for, like, plot reasons, it's just kind of waved off as, oh yeah, that's the Speed Force. So, in that glue, it's like, oh yeah, Pym Particles. That's the explanation for whatever just happened, Pym Particles. And why are Pym Particles like Pym Particles? Because they're Pym Particles, and it just kind of goes in this infinite loop feedback, where it's like, just forget about it, just shove the popcorn in your face, and accept that they're Pym Particles.
Yeah.
So they can't breathe normally if they don't have the mask, right? If they're smaller giants.
Yeah.
Because and I never really liked that, because I feel like in the comics they always you can see their faces, right? You can see Ant-Man and the Wasp's faces, which kind of I think adds a little more character, and I think in a movie sense it would kind of give them more of an opportunity to emote and actually act rather than like have a stunts double in a suit or something like that. But I don't know. It's weird that's like that. It was the scientific accurate quote unquote thing they were trying to go for in Ant-Man. So what was it about the second movie, Betsy, that irked you?
Well,
I think the second one probably did the worst offenses.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If like Thor 1 did a good job, in my opinion, then Ant-Man and the Wasp did like the worst job, because Chris and I saw it at the same time, and I remember going out of the theater and just being like, what the fuck? Like, you can't just add, I know it was a joke in the movie, but you can't just add quantum to everything and expect us all to believe you. Like, how, like, what is this other world that they're going to? How are you, like, I don't know. I don't know a lot about quantum physics because, like, I'm a bio major. It's been a while since I took physics. I just sort of read about it sometimes. But I do understand the basics of, like, particles that are able to exist in two states at once and, like, theoretically making machines that can, like, calculate based on both of those things. And it seems like such a far cry from this very theoretical field to, like, oh, we're going to take a journey into another magical world where there are, like, animals somehow, and, like, Janet Van Dyne can survive there for decades, and, like, there are tardigrades or something.
I mean, it has this kind of, like, Jules Verne feel to it almost, like, which I would have liked better if they spent more time in the movie, if they, like, went that route of, like, oh, like, journey to the center of the atom or whatever like, whatever the hell they were going for.
Yeah. And I think if they did it like that, then it would be more believable, too, because then you're, like, in the fiction. Whereas the way they do it, it's just, like, 10 minutes of absolute weirdness. You know?
What the hell were they breathing down there?
They just... It's not air.
Yeah. I think my problem with Ant-Man and the Wasp isn't even the plot stuff so much as it is how they pretend that they're explaining it, but they're actually not even a little bit explaining it. It's like, it would be better if it was done in the way that, like, Guardians of the Galaxy is, where it's just like, oh, here's some weird stuff that exists, you know? And we're gonna maybe give it a name, but, like, that's it. I think, because it takes away from... Because like, everyone watching it knows that it's not realistic. So that, you're just taking time away from, like, the plot of the movie. And you're confusing people.
Yeah. It just becomes, like, just excessive exposition, and, I mean, I guess they tried to lampshade it when, like, Scott Lang's like, okay, I don't know what anyone's talking about, which is, like, kind of a ha-ha moment, but that's kind of, like, the movie's making an effort to try to make a lick of sense, and it just isn't, which, like, makes it, the fact that it's trying and failing, like, makes that even worse, like you were saying. So yeah, hot take, Ant-Man the Wasp, terrible science movie.
Yep. I mean, I don't think that's a hot take.
Yeah. I mean, it's very funny. Like, there are good things about it. But... Oh
yeah. No, the part when he's like little kid size was hilarious. Doctor Strange. He is a doctor. He's a doctor of medicine. He's a surgeon. He is but he kind of goes through this arc where he kind of accepts the reality of magic.
The mystic arts.
Yeah, the mystic arts. He's not a wizard, he's the master of the mystic arts. So what did that I don't know, talk to me about kind of the fact, like, I feel like that plot was, maybe Thor 1 was a little bit, but I feel like more so than Thor 1, Doctor Strange was more about the relationship between science and quote-unquote magic as, like, a theme to its story. Does anyone have any thoughts on the Doctor Strange movie?
I mean, I think there's more spiritual elements to it. Like, it's more like spiritual thing. It's not like magic. It's not magic or fantasy. It's more spiritual stuff. And if the spiritual is real, then all that other stuff is real. Like, that's the boundary. Does that make sense?
I guess so, yeah. I'm thinking a lot about the scene where he's talking to the Ancient One for the first time, and he's trying to process everything that the Ancient One is telling him, but in kind of, like, scientific terms.
Well, it's science. It's science day.
He doesn't believe in chakras,
and
yeah.
It's his science.
Yeah.
In the super future, all of what was discussed is science.
You're like being very intimate with your microphone right now, and I'm very uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable or comfortable? This is Anthony's ASMR hour. How are you?
I need to take my
Doctor
headphones off.
Strange.
This is too much.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah. Doctor Strange was an interesting one. I mean, I liked sitting next to my dad while watching Doctor Strange because he is a doctor.
How did he feel
him,
about
like,
it?
I mean, like there were like little things about like just like being able to walk into a certain room in the hospital, and he was like, "No, you can't do that." He wasn't even talking about like the surgery or like how hospital. Like he was just talking about like the logistics of how hospitals run, which I found really funny.
Yeah.
He appeared into the closet, and then somehow, can he just be thrown on a table like that and no one give a shit?
No, not at all. No. I mean,
even
I
if it's late at night.
I guess not, but I do remember him like.
Wait, it wasn't late at night.
No, it was during the day. Yeah. My mom and dad, because like they both went to medical. That's how they met. They went to medical school, and they were kind of like whispering to each other like during the first surgery scene in Doctor Strange. Like, okay, finally, I got them interested in something here, and then it became like Mads Mikkelsen and his weird eyes, which that's what I was there for.
You were there for the weird eyes?
Yeah. Mads Mikkelsen always has weird eyes in his appearances.
What about in Rogue One?
I guess not. I'm thinking like Casino Royale.
What happens in Casino Royale?
Oh, he has like a scar over his eye, because like James Bond villains are always like deformed in some way.
That's good.
And then of course Death Stranding. He's got a lot of weird eye stuff going on there.
Oh, he doesn't?
Yeah, he does. Anyway, Death Stranding, very scientifically accurate.
Oh wait, no, he does.
Game.
He does.
Yeah,
he
he
does in
definitely
Death
does.
Stranding. You're right. He does.
So
You're right.
I felt like the science aspects of Spider-Man Homecoming were kind of de-emphasized. Did anyone else feel that?
Was there any science?
There was one scene of him.
They could have been like really cool and talked about how he made his webbing.
There was one shot of him like
does
mixing
it in
something.
Chem Lab,
Yeah.
which is
He has.
How does
which
he
is
have
cool.
that much? I don't know. How does he?
How does he have the ingredients to do that?
Yeah. It just seems
like
so.
How did he come up with it?
Yeah. It seems so unsafe that he was just like hiding it in a drawer, but at the same time, that's so like 15-year-old boy that I totally.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
and it's kind of cool how he lifted up the entire rack of lockers.
Yeah.
And then pulled it out. It would have been. Do you want to make that scene super funny? He landed it and then ran out, and then all of a sudden, a dorky kid falls out of the lockers and like covers his mouth because he feels like he's gonna throw up.
That poor boy.
Yeah,
he has the formula like scribbled onto a piece of paper in that scene, I think.
So but did anyone remember what was on it? Like how does he know what is in it? Like, what is the thought process? Did he test it?
He must have.
Yeah.
Why hasn't anyone else made that
himself.
webbing? Why hasn't anyone else made that webbing? Does he as Ned said, leak fluids?
I think Spider-Man Homecoming is fun because they don't explain how he has his powers at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, here you go. Fully fledged.
We know how he has his powers.
Yeah, we don't need to tell you about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like
he was bit by a radioactive spider.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we've already got Bruce Banner. We've already got Steve Rogers, so it's fine.
Yeah, let's watch that Andrew Garfield movie again. No, it's not. Watch that movie. So what would happen if you're actually? Well, I mean, I think in modern interpretations of Spider-Man, it's not a radioactive spider. I think it's a genetically modified spider of some sort. I think that's how the movies did it. Like the Tobey Maguire and the Andrew Garfield movies did it. So yeah, I mean, I assume it's a genetically engineered spider, not a radioactive spider. Interesting to modern audiences, I guess, because no one cares about radioactive stuff anymore. So what would happen in real life if you got bit by that kind of spider?
Probably the spider would have to be so genetically engineered that if it bit you, it would have to emit its DNA and fuse with your DNA. And then not only that,
Uh-huh.
your DNA would have to change so quickly and so rapidly that the changes are almost instantaneous.
Yeah. No, it's like the closest thing.
You're the biologist.
The closest thing that I can think of to that happening is like bacteria that have like mutated genomes that are, because their genomes are just like one big circle, and sometimes they can pick up, like they can trade with bacteria of the same species or different species, or like viruses can go in there and splice it and then carry it out, and that's how like different whatever. So, but that's bacteria. That's just like single-celled organism.
Yeah.
Like, it could be some kind of complicated genetic virus that is coming in and taking pieces of that has like the spider's DNA. It takes pieces of it and then goes into your cells, and then
then the white blood cells would need to would react to it.
Yeah. I don't know.
My solution is that we test this out.
See, this is why they don't. This is why they don't talk about it at all in Spider-Man: Homecoming. They've done enough bullshit already.
They don't need to hear the bullshit. Yeah. And I think
they just need the cool character.
I think that's another example of how the MCU does it right. If it's too ridiculous, other than Ant-Man and the Wasp, if it's like too ridiculous and they can't get, and they don't want, and they can get past it, they'll get past it.
Yeah,
they ignore it.
Betsy, do you want to talk about Bruce Banner being in that, the line of pictures of scientists?
I just like that he's there. He's like, there's a shot where you see Peter's classroom. I think it's like a biology or physics room, and he's one of them.
You have Albert Einstein and
Bruce Banner.
Bruce Banner, yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, well, one of the greats.
One of the greats.
Yeah, I mean, so much so that.
But this segues into something that I want to talk about, which is not just portrayals of science, like as sort of explanations for technology or phenomena, but also portrayals of scientists. Because the MCU has quite a few of them when you think about like Tony Stark, who's a great engineer, Bruce Banner, Shuri, Helen Cho, who's in Age of Ultron, and like so many other cool characters. And Bruce Banner, there's a line in Thor Ragnarok, right, that makes me so annoyed that I told like everyone I know in various science fields about it, because I'm just like, you guys can't, like, I can't believe they put this in there, where he says that he has 7 PhDs. No human person has ever had 7 PhDs. And I believe you that...
What are those 7 PhDs even in?
Right, like, he doesn't need them.
Like, here's the thing. If you are a gamma scientist, gamma radiation scientist, and right, that's it, right? That's what he is.
That's what he is. That's his specialty.
And like, he has a doctorate in that, and he did theses on the same type of thing. Like, if he did 6 more theses on gamma radiation, that's not 6 more doctorates.
Yeah. It's like, if you want to do 7 doctorates, that would take you probably, like,
40
years.
Yeah. 40 years.
I mean, you could theoretically say, like, okay, he did some kind of special project and he finished it really quickly. But why would he want to?
That's 2 PhDs.
Why would he want to? He's like...
Forgetting about the power of extra credit.
He would want to, like... He would want to be working on his research or, like, teaching students, because, like, canonically he taught at some university. I forget which one. Mm-hmm. It's really funny, actually, if you read his bio in the Marvel Cinematic Universe wiki, it's like, oh yeah, here's his whole academic history. And then somebody just put in there after Ragnarok came out, like, in the course of his life, Bruce Banner acquired 7 PhDs. And it's like, they didn't even try to justify it, because clearly it's ridiculous.
Citation needed.
Yeah.
He got a PhD in space because he was one of the only human beings to go with space.
Sure.
Space.
Yeah. I mean, I have seen, like headcanons that is like he just says that in Ragnarok because he thinks it will impress Thor, and then Thor will get off.
You know,
which I really like.
I like.
It's
that.
like actually he
I
just
like
has
that
one.
a little bit better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe two.
Maybe
you
two.
Can get two PhDs.
He could do like biology and nuclear physics or something.
Right.
Like
yeah.
that's fine.
I know people who have two PhDs.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know them personally, but I know of people that exist. That have
people
two
exist
PhDs.
in the world that have two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, this made me. I know this is gonna be a tangent, but this made me think about. You know how they have baby Looney Tunes? What if they had baby Marvel, like baby Marvel superheroes?
That I think that's literally a cartoon. That's literally a thing.
Oh my god, it is! I forgot it existed.
I'm gonna look it up, but
No, it is.
but...
I remember reading the little. I remember the comics. They're like crawling on like Hulk. Like Hulk is like looks like a medium-sized kid, and all the babies are like baby Cap and baby Spider-Man are crawling on top of him. It's very.
I'm sure there's fan art like that somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's called Marvel Superhero Adventures. I think there's literally like a baby Punisher, which I think is hilarious.
Wow.
Considering if anyone's been following along what we talked about with the Punisher.
Yeah. Was there anything? Did everything else that Bruce Banner said in Ragnarok, was that all? I mean, there was the part when he's kind of glowing about what they called the Devil's Anus, which was that was a lot of dialogue.
Is that an
there.
Einstein Rosenberg bridge? Is that a collapsing neutron star inside of an Einstein Rosenberg bridge?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which all those words are real,
but together,
I believe you.
But together, how would he know that is a collapsing neutron star inside of an Einstein Rosenberg?
He's never been in space before. How is he? Whatever.
Exactly. The representations that we have of neutron stars and Einstein Rosenberg bridges are artistic. Yeah. There's no we have never seen them in we have pictures of neutron stars collapsing neutron stars, but we have infrared pictures.
Yeah.
So it's baffling.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't think Matthew McConaughey saw one in Interstellar and relate to us what that looks like. Okay, that's Ragnarok, I guess, unless I'm missing anything else, because Ragnarok was kind of that was Taika Waititi kind of changing the tone of the Thor franchise, so I felt that
made it wackier.
I think similar to the Guardians movies, it's we can have whatever insane shit because we're in space.
Yeah.
Who knows how old the Grandmaster is? Who cares?
Yeah,
we're not going to talk about relativity. It's just funny. He's here. Whatever.
Yeah.
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 The reason why I care so much about that line from Bruce Banner, besides it just being ridiculous, is that sort of goes back to what I said at the beginning about science in media as a way of showcasing scientists in the real world, and how you can sort of get some kind of idea from watching a scientist who is portrayed well in a movie of what somebody who does that job in real life, what their life is like. And if Bruce Banner is just I have 7 PhDs, that gives anybody who's watching it who's not in an academic field, which is most people, kind of a ridiculous idea of what science
a PhD is.
Imagine if a 10-year-old who wants to go be a biologist is watching that, and they're like, oh no, I need 7 PhDs. No, you don't. You're good.
I'm gonna have 10.
No. It sort of minimizes the actual work that it takes to be in an academic field and to get a PhD. And
it makes it sound like it's an attainable goal, which it absolutely is not.
But it also makes it sound like that's what you want out of science. You just want to rack up the numbers. When it's actually about going into one thing and
it's about making a difference
and getting really good at it. Yeah.
You're not considered to be smart unless you have all of these PhDs, which is not true at all.
How it works.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of mixed feelings about Shuri as a character. Actually, she's the next thing on the list. Obviously she's a cool character and she's fun to watch and she's funny and she's really inspiring. But I think similar to saying Bruce has 7 PhDs, she sort of seems to be an expert in everything at the age of like 18. And I feel like that gives so much pressure. That puts so much pressure on her. That I'm like, whenever I see her on screen, I'm just like, oh no, she's going to have to do like everything. And that feels like
they even have that scene of her like kind of oh, that's okay, you tried your best to Bruce Banner in Infinity War. To kind of like asserting her like intelligence like over this like adult man with 7 PhDs, I might add. But
supposedly.
Yeah, I mean that the ending of Black Panther, they decided to like make a bunch of community centers, I guess, which in itself, like there are some things that should be talked about that in another episode. The fact that like they might, displace people in this area of Oakland, but like the fact that like their solution is okay, our way of outreaching to these communities is by teaching them STEM. Teaching them.
That's a good thing to do. Like that was definitely needed. Like STEM education. Right.
I do want to also point out, sucks. Arts are important.
Yeah.
Arts are necessary in a society.
Yeah.
Totally.
There are many people out there who think that only STEM is important.
Yeah.
If you only have STEM in your life, then you live an unfulfilling life.
That's true.
Oh yeah.
That is my there we go. That is my serious note of the day.
Yeah.
Make Wakandan art centers in Oakland. I was watching so I talked about my dad with Doctor Strange. My mom was just like not down for Shuri while you were watching Black Panther. She was like, okay, I get she's smart, but like she doesn't even have any assistants. Like there's like it's just literally her in this lab. It's like what is like how is this even this is totally unrealistic.
She had assistants.
I don't remember any in Black Panther, to be honest.
Yeah, but I mean they don't come up. They're just there. They're there.
It was just like her and her electronic music in her like little cave. Like in her little like downward staircase spiral glowy lab, and it was a very cool like Q from James Bond scene, but like even Q like has like some like extras like walking around with lab coats and like
okay, Chris,
pressing a button or something.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What is more of a realistic universe?
Mm-hmm.
The MCU or Overwatch?
Why are you bringing Overwatch into this?
I will get to it. I want to ask.
I guess the MCU. I don't know.
Then my point's invalid. The creator of Orisa is like a little kid.
Yeah, and that's a very like in terms of like image of like, hey, like you two can like get into STEM, which is like I think a very important part of Shuri. Like that's like the exciting part of that character, and that's why like a lot of people, myself, like are really into her.
Yeah, and that's why she's an incredible character. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think my mom was just like questioning like the practicality of this scenario, which I don't know. I was like arguing with her about it, but I mean, it's. Do you think there's like any truth to that? I mean, should we care first of all that like if it like whether it's realistic or not?
No,
I mean
if it represents.
Yeah, no. I don't think it matters a ton. Not so much as like other things that we could talk about, but it is sort of like if you want to portray a realistic lab setting, like your mom is right that she wouldn't be the only one there. Also, she probably wouldn't be designing new like weapons or car remote driving things in the same place as she was doing like medical work. Like the way that they depict her lab, it seems like Wakanda has one center for all of the sciences, and it's Shuri's place. And it's like she is brilliant, but is she really your top expert on like every field? That just
like
seems
not only
like,
expert.
That seems like when does she sleep? Like when did she have time to master all of this stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. Like where did she study all of this?
Like it could be equally inspirational to see a bunch of different characters who to have some really good doctors and some really good engineers, and like they're all
Yeah, like, what does a hospital in Wakanda look like? What does a school in Wakanda look like? Like, that's why I wanted this movie to be like a freaking HBO miniseries and just, like, kind of flesh out the entire society. Because, like, they're technologically advanced.
I think they will,
but, like,
in the sequel, and the third movie, and the fourth movie, and the fifth movie.
The Wakanda cinematic universe.
The one, I mean, that's pretty much. Because I feel like there was a line of dialogue by M'Baku in the challenge thing, the challenge day scene, where he was kind of like criticizing, you know, the mainline, like, Wakanda people, and saying how all of their technological advances are from, like, one little girl, and it's like, oh shit, then, like, Shuri is like the foundation of this entire society in a way. Like, she is the reason why they are able to, like, do any of this. Was that what they were implying? So then without her, like, what like, what were they like before her? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they saw flying ships in flashbacks before she was even born, so I guess there was, like, previous Shuris before her, then she kind of, I guess,
she's just the most recent and the most brilliant, the most creative, whatever.
Yeah.
If you have so this is actually comes down to a lot of socioeconomic issues. Mm-hmm. But if you have a society that doesn't have to worry about day-to-day life, you can have people that like can read and learn and be more educated at a younger age. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
if this society doesn't have to worry about certain things on a day-to-day level because they already have so many technological advances before Shuri, then she can learn all this stuff real quick and really easily, right? Because they don't only have the material to teach, but they have better methods on teaching.
Right.
Like, this is not only a society that has cool tech, this is also a society that functions like 10 times faster and 10 times more efficiently than ours.
Yeah.
From what we've seen, yeah.
Yeah, so, like, think about it. Like, hundreds of years ago, education took years to get, like, doctorates and PhDs. Now we know how long it takes. And then, like, think about it in the future. It could be even faster.
You can get 7 PhDs, maybe.
You can get 7 PhDs.
Maybe you can. You still might not need that.
Well, that's why PhDs were so highly regarded in the past, is because it took so long to get one.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So Shuri is just like...
There's a combination of other factors.
By
her surroundings, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Mm-hmm. But so I think when it comes to, like, talking about how science works in the MCU, you also have to think about how the society works and how certain things can be promoted in a society that has certain things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Like, you have people like, if you learn that there are aliens, you have more people focusing on space age tech, right? Because there's more people interested in it. So
yeah, I mean, and that was kind of a big point of Avengers 1, where, like, they have technology from the Destroyer from Thor 1, and they have the Tesseract, so they're able to kind of it's like
build
almost
off of those things.
Yeah, build. I mean, but it turns into like a kind of arms race where it's like Earth is trying to be more equipped to handle extraterrestrial threats, which is interesting. Which is like a cool way of kind of like interweaving all these different worlds together. You know, like the fantastical elements of Thor colliding with the realism of Iron Man. That turns into an actual plot point, which I think is like really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's, I believe, I forget what it is, but there's a TV show or a movie, or something, or a book where, society advanced because they interacted with aliens, but it didn't happen in another timeline. So there are 2 timelines that are basically identical, except one timeline interacted with aliens and one didn't. And because of that society is more advanced.
I mean, that's how the Star Trek, like when you add the Enterprise show, you know, they're kind of like being handheld by the Vulcans, and that's kind of how they Which is why Enterprise is like I have a big problem with Enterprise because it makes like the accomplishments of Earthbound people like less significant because the Vulcans already had all that information. But yeah, I mean, I guess in that way it'll be like the real world versus the Star Trek universe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's wait a few decades and see if First Contact happens at the same time as the Star Trek universe.
Hopefully.
And we'll see whatever goes from there.
Hopefully they help us out real well and don't just be like, we're shit.
Yeah.
It's like, please.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. Please.
Yeah. I bet there is, like, some sort of alien scout watching us and like, oh, no, these guys are shit. Let's not even bother with them.
But, like, what if there's that one dude on that ship who's just like, wait, these guys might have potential.
Nope.
and then 2016
No way.
happened and it's just like,
Yeah.
I owe you a drink. And then they fly off into
sure.
the sunset. Or whatever the alien drink,
We'll workshop that screenplay, Anthony.
we'll get it, yes.
It'll be
Get that shit off the ground.
Who added all these links about the Infinity Stones?
Oh, that was me.
Not me.
That was me. So not all of this.
There was a few movies.
Oh, that's your
that-
Tumblr,
There was a
right?
few like YouTube videos I watched about like the power of like how much power he needs to snap his fingers.
Yeah.
Because remember there's 6 fucking black holes.
Yeah.
So like how much power is needed just to physically move his fingers in a snapping fashion?
Luckily, he's a Titan or whatever.
Yeah.
Super powerful alien.
I always thought about that actual.
All that
like,
for a drop of blood.
Yeah.
I watched it the other day with commentary. So.
Yeah, I think I rewatched it like every other day since I got it on Blu-ray.
Yep, I'm probably gonna watch it again without.
Dear Lord.
commentary.
Okay. Betsy, what were these links that you added here that I have yet to look at for some reason? I'm just curious what's to extrapolate from this because like my prompt was like I'm reading the exact quote, now that we have goddamn Infinity Stones, does science even matter anymore?
Yeah, well, I think the first part of my answer to that question was not really, because Thanos doesn't need to care about science because he has this sort of infinite power.
Right.
One thing that I think for me and maybe some other people, although probably not that many people, that was really hard to grapple with in watching Infinity War is that his plan to quote-unquote balance the universe makes literally no sense. Because if you look at like how population ecology actually works, he would just create more chaos. I saw this Tumblr post like a few months ago, right after the movie came out, that was basically saying like, actually, people have done small studies on this, where a biological experiment where some beetles were placed in an environment where all their needs were met finitely, and then after a certain point, they would remove a percentage of the adults, and then from around 50%, they would let the population grow back, and either it would cause uncontrolled population growth again, or it would cause massive population decline, depending on like which beetles are left.
Right.
Yeah, isn't there like I was gonna add on top of that. There's like hundreds of population studies, like mathematically and biologically, of like what happens when populations get out of control and what needs to happen to sustain them. But, sorry, go back to what you were saying.
Yeah, I was just gonna cite that this is, if you look up flower beetle chaos population dynamics, that's what I'm referencing.
Okay.
But yeah, it's basically like Thanos read the first 2 pages of a eugenics book and then just sort of ran with it and didn't bother to look at the rest or talk to anyone or like get anyone to like, like in like a science world, if somebody was like, hey, I'm going to do this massive experiment, you need to get people to like test it with you first, or he's just like, no, I'm going for it.
Look, he did test it. He tested it on planets. And he killed half of the population.
He tested
it's
it.
a paradise now.
And
That's what he said.
Except that,
doubtful.
no, like somebody pointed out, I remember seeing this, that Gamora is actually the last survivor of her planet. So, did it work?
Is it a paradise because there's no
there's no people
like living
left?
creatures on it?
Yeah.
What was I gonna say? I mean, this is kind of an overarching thing, but I think Infinity War brings us, when it comes to this type of conversation, it brings us to like the physical science of the Infinity Stones, Thanos snapping his fingers, blah blah blah. But it also brings us into the ethics of science.
Yeah.
And how, because eugenics is a big thing.
Wow, understatement. Eugenics is a big thing. Yeah.
I mean, like,
go ahead.
Like, when it comes to like understanding Thanos, and you mentioned it,
yes,
Betsy, you mentioned how like, and there are so many people out there that think that eugenics is a good idea, or that we just need to make people not have children anymore, or other things, and it's like that's not the problems that we as humans are. Like, that those aren't the overpopulation isn't as big as a problem that humans are describing.
Yeah, the bigger problems are like learning to control disease outbreaks,
land use,
smarter agriculture so that we can actually feed everyone. You know, like Thanos, if you care so much about saving the universe, why didn't you just like bring back all of our extinct species, or like our like
so the idea with
forests,
that
oceans, whatever.
And this was from the commentary, because the Russo brothers and Marcus and McFeely both brought this up, where they said like, yeah, we got a lot of criticism saying like, oh, why didn't he just make double of everything? It's like, well, they don't learn from that. He's crazy,
right?
He has his own evil, his chaotic evil. Is he lawful evil or chaotic evil?
I think lawful, because he has his own morality that he prescribes to. I think that's how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, he is lawful evil. So his, like, they were saying like, oh, he can't just double everything because people like intelligent beings won't learn how to sustain themselves. If he just doubles everything, then they'll use up all the doubling, and then he'll just have to keep doing it over and over again, and that's not sustainable.
I think another thing that they were talking about, and I'm probably just paraphrasing, but they were talking about how, Thanos' plan is inherently irrational,
Yes.
And I think that's something that did not register well in the movie itself without the commentary, because it feel like it's trying to make his solution sound too plausible to make him sympathetic as a character, which I guess is not what they were going for, but that's what it felt like.
That's what a lot of people take away from it too, because all the reviews are like, oh, Thanos is such a good villain. Like, you really, like, understand his point of view, and I'm sitting there like, no, I don't. I think it's stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's bad.
Yeah.
I don't know, I was gonna bring up, there's a lot of people I know that think that Thanos is actually right. That I've seen. And it's like, oh, okay. I didn't think you guys were real.
Sam Reardon did the Infinity War episode with us. That was episode 4 of AP Marvel, and shortly after, they started sending me screenshots of tweets who were citing Thanos as like a correct example. So, like, for example, what was it? When they tried to open the embassy in Jerusalem, and there were a lot of Palestinians who were killed during protests, there was some comment that was like, oh, it's for the greater good, just think about Thanos. And that was a real tweet from a real person that Sam decided to screenshot and send to me. It's like, see, I told you these people exist. Like, oh my god.
Oh my god. That's why, like, bad portrayal. I mean, that's why this shit is dangerous.
Well, I just think that people are dumb.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's just dumb people.
I think they already have problems by themselves without the movie.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, like, for example, what is it? American History X is like a portrayal of how evil people can be, and people are just like, and then neo-Nazis take this like, oh, that's who I want to be.
Yeah, or like when people, someone says their favorite movie is Fight Club, and it's like, oh yeah, I started my own Fight Club after I saw Fight Club. It's like, dude, that is not the point of Fight Club, you idiot.
You did not.
You did not watch Fight Club.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like when people see these movies, they're just like, oh, I should do that. It's like, no, they don't. Like, it's the same people with people who think that like, oh, look at Starship Troopers. Look how great that system is. It's like, look how much they love the military and stuff. It's like, no, you fucking idiots. It's mocking hyper-patriotism and fascism. You pieces of human garbage. Oh my god.
We can go on and on with examples because there are just so many of them.
It's so many examples of movies that are portraying something so you get an idea of what's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, but everyone's like
because the heroes lose because the bad guy's idea is bad.
Yeah,
it's bad.
Not to mention Thanos cheated. Like the Infinity Stones are cheat codes.
Yeah,
like
he kills people.
I mean, like whenever someone with Scarlet Witch or Star-Lord when they were willing to sacrifice their loved ones, which is more of a thematic thing than like a practical scientific thing. Like Thanos is kind of like, oh, I'm just gonna undo this because I have the power to do that, like this unrealistic power to reverse or prevent whatever you just did.
Yeah.
So yeah, cheat codes. Thanos has the Konami code, and that's
the Konami code to the universe.
That's how he won, by just like literally spitting on science and be like, hey, I got these stones, I can literally reinvent the rules of how reality works.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? I mean, this is a topic for another time, but I think having a conversation about ethics when it comes to science is super important.
Mm-hmm.
You are given these tools, you are given the tool of knowledge, and you have to use it wisely to help and protect people.
Yeah.
And if you use it to hurt and kill people, it's bad. That's it. But with Thanos, specifically with the movie, I think that whatever 4 is about, they'll cover more of the ethics of what he did and like why it's bad. Like they'll show how
I assume
irrational.
it will. Yeah.
And I mean, like that. I feel like that's going to be part of it.
Yeah.
It's like this person's irrational.
Yeah, but you bring up a really good point that I think kind of can tie in all the movies together. The idea of responsibility, with the power that you have of like scientific knowledge and resources. So, Tony Stark and Obadiah Stane, like they decided to use their responsibility in very different ways. Ant-Man, like the first Ant-Man, that was the whole dilemma. Like. Shrinking people can change the course of warfare, and that's what that movie became about.
Yeah, but like, I mean, I see this all the time because it's a problem that we're dealing with, where we have computer scientists, like in Silicon Valley, across the country, and NSA, who do their job unethically.
Yeah,
and they don't think about how other human beings are going to be impacted by their choices.
Right.
And it's important to know that. When you have mechanical engineers who go off to work for companies like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and create weapons, and those weapons go to, like arms dealers in the Middle East, and then those arms dealers then blow up buses full of school children in Yemen. It's like, you contributed to that. Is there guilt? Is there remorse? So
yeah.
If you ask Tony Stark, I mean, he was the embodiment of that remorse, I guess, for that whole first movie.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you could say, like, to tie this together, that the scientific knowledge that characters like Bruce Banner or Tony Stark or Shuri have is kind of comparable to superpowers, which is evident through all of the movies anyway. That people who are incredibly smart are on sort of the same playing field with people who have gotten some kind of
superpower in some capacity.
Yeah. That's literally what, and I know we're going to the TV show side, but that's what Runaways did with, I forget, with Chase, or Greg Sulkin's character, because everyone else had superpowers, and he just decided to, like, build, like, robotic fists to, like, be at their level, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of going back to that Uncle Ben mantra: with great power comes great responsibility, and scientific knowledge is a power.
Scientific knowledge is a power.
Yeah.
And like, you know, there's power of will, there's power of heart, there's power of knowledge.
Power,
like,
the power of
when you
love.
have those powers, what do you do with them?
And I think when Marvel gives us a better representation of what those powers can look like, whether that's giving a science character who's really cool and like really inspirational, but also sort of relatable, like Shuri, or giving a world that ties science into magic and makes it seem like practicing science is really exciting, like Thor does or Guardians of the Galaxy does. Like, I don't know. It's a useful lesson from the movies.
Yeah, I think Marvel's doing like a decent job. Like it's you know, the way the example I cite and how it's bleeding into pop culture is when Obama was president. I think he had that one press conference and he joked, like, I forget what the context was, but he was like, "Oh yeah, we're making Iron Man," and like that got a lot of laughter from the room. And it's like, oh yeah, because like Iron Man is who we view as like a, you know, intelligent like captain of industry, like making cool, useful scientific things. Like that kind of bled into the real world, which I think is really cool. You know, whenever if you see like any video on YouTube of like a prototype exosuit, you know, that the military is testing out, like people are probably gonna be like, oh yeah, just like Iron Man, you know, just like kind of helping us get used to that idea as they're trying to develop that in the real world.
Yeah.
So I guess,
are we gonna even like touch the science of the Infinity Stones, because it's like
oh
yeah,
man,
it's just a mess.
What science of the Infinity Stones? What are you talking about?
It's a thing.
I don't know.
They're like physics.
There's 6 black holes concentrated into colorful little rocks.
Yeah.
That their primary and secondary colors are just gonna, or they're not like tertiary colors, or like what if like the space stone was taupe, guys, and not blue, you know, or mauve, or periwinkle.
I also found a fun article that was trying to justify the Infinity Stones as like manifestations of some of the basic laws of physics, which is like, I don't know.
I think they're reaching at that point.
Yeah, I think the black holes thing makes more sense.
Yeah, look, what Marvel has up on competitors like DC is that the characters that they're using are more realistic, and there's more to play around with when it comes to genre and character that makes it more relatable and connectable, and like you can explore themes that everyday humans face. Whereas with the DC characters, all of them are kind of super fantastical and more godlike than human, which isn't fun, in my opinion. But that's that's another note for another time.
Sure. Yeah. Anything else on Infinity War before we loop back to our kind of thesis question?
I think we had a good point about the importance of ethics.
Yeah.
And I think that's,
talk about ethics all day.
But like when it comes to science, as a scientist.
Yeah.
Yes, as we are all scientists here, all three of us.
We've talked about ethics. We've talked about ethics on AP Marvel before, but it's important that when it comes to science,
it's also
that's my final point on that.
Yeah. So should we even bother with science anymore now that we're at this point? Like, I think the second Spider-Man Far From Home will be the next movie after Avengers 4.
I think they'll do it.
Yeah, and also we still have Captain Marvel coming up. You know?
So Captain Marvel's gonna be
should we try like reeling it back in? Like, hey, we had all this crazy fantastical stuff, but let's ground it a little more.
We talked about it. We've talked about grounding multiple times in different ways. We've talked about grounding characters when it comes to like let's see more Ant-Man doing real person things. Let's see more power. Let's dampen down the power sets, because our power creep is massive.
Sure, I wasn't in that episode, but yeah.
Which we talked about. Well, it's coming out this week, but it will be last week.
Sure.
All these different factors go into how to ground the MCU in some capacity and try to keep it, bring it back. Far From Home is going to have Mysterio, and Mysterio is going to be cool because he doesn't have any powers. His powers are special effects, and I think that will be cool.
Yeah. I think it's important to sort of come back and ground it because, like, for the sake of the audience, because people are only going to watch so many Infinity War huge, big fantasy movies.
Right.
Before they just start to get super confused.
They cannot do another one of those for another 10 years.
Yeah. Like,
or another 2 of these.
I'm just thinking about people like my parents who are, more normal moviegoers and, like, aren't really into superhero movies. Like, they might see the Iron Man films. They wouldn't see Infinity War. It's just too much. So you have to bring it back and make it something that people who have no idea what's going on in the comics or don't care about, seeing magic or whatever, but just want to see a movie that will be entertaining for 2 hours, but also will, like, follow a flow of logic that they can get. I don't know, your science has to be believable enough that it can hold people who aren't just, like, who aren't nerds like we are, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, any final thoughts on our Marvel Science 101 episode? Anything before we get to our little closing here? Anthony, anything?
Ethics are important when understanding science.
Okay, Betsy, anything?
Bruce Banner only has 2 PhDs. He lied. He was trying to impress Thor. But Thor doesn't even know what a PhD is, so Bruce's attempts were in... It's fine.
Yeah. Anthony, where can people find you on Twitter?
You can find me at The Pizza Taco on Twitter.
Betsy, what any social media handles you would like to plug? Anything else you would like to plug that to promote to the good people listening to this?
Yeah, I'm at Owl in A minor on Twitter. So that's owl like the animal, and then in A minor like the key of music. Also, if you can spell my last name, I have a website that has a little science blog attached to it. If you're curious what my research has been this summer, so there's some fun stuff about trees on there.
Ooh, you talk about trees?
My research has to do with trees. Well, I mean, it's on trees, so yeah.
What?
Yeah, so what do you think of Groot, then?
Oh, Groot's the best.
Of course, you can find me at Compendorizer. You can email me at chris@marvelnewsdesk.com if you want to send me any topic ideas, any anecdotes you want to share. Or if you just want to criticize me like people do on Twitter sometimes these days. Thanks to Steve Maltor for our awesome jazz track. Izzy's show, who is not here today. She is hard at work at school right now.
As we recorded our podcast.
Yeah, she's teaching the Stuco class right now, the Marvel Film and Media Studies class that we keep talking about. So Godspeed to Izzy and Aaron and Sabrina who are teaching that. And, of course, our Patreon for Marvel News Desk. You can find that, a link to that in the description. And, yep, that's all we got today. Anthony, thank you for being here. Thank you for filling in for me for the previous episode.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, I haven't I haven't listened to it yet. I have no clue what you guys talked about. It could be shit for all I know. But
you didn't even hear it? You didn't even listen to
it? I've been a very busy dude, and I'm going to listen to it when I edit it eventually, so calm down. Betsy, does the name Laura Berry mean anything to you?
Oh no, I wonder.
Well, I never really give her credit in the show because I think she told me to, like, don't worry about it, but I think Laura is kind of like, and Laura has been on my Runaways podcast during the last episode. I think the title AP Marvel was actually her doing.
Wow.
Because we were trying to like come up with all of these titles, and like we were just throwing a bunch of each other. I think AP Marvel like won everyone over. So
that's a good title.
Yeah, I'm just gonna give a shout out to Laura, whether she wants me to or not. Yeah, thank you, Laura. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Izzy. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Betsy, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We've been talking about this for quite some time. Yeah, and we caught you before. We caught you before you're gonna be super busy, I presume, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, 3 of my classes are like senior seminars, so we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good night. Goodbye, everyone.
The votes are closing today, and I think dogs should vote.
You're right.
Okay.
I think dogs should vote.
I think trees should vote.
Hot takes. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.